The other day, update 1.8.86 was released for Starfield. While it did add in a few nice fixes and quality of life improvements, there wasn't anything really game-changing that came along with it. While I do believe that Starfield is a good game, I'm also aware that there's some things which really need to be changed for it to ever be great. And so I've put together this video, going over a handful of changes I think need to be made in future patches. And to be clear, these are the changes I think need to be made. There's plenty of other changes I'd like to see, and which I will cover in future videos, but for now I'm just focusing on the elements which Bethesda should be making a priority. First up on my list are outposts. If you've spent some time playing around with the outpost system inside of Starfield, then you likely know what a pain it can be. The game has so many different resources that are required to build things, but the player character has so little carry capacity that you either end up crawling your way across planets to gather what you need, or take about 20 trips just to build one basic outpost. And then you have to actually find the right place to build the damn thing. Plenty of planets aren't able to be built on. Once you do find a planet that is good to build on without needing high level skills, you then have to try and find a place on it with the resources you're after, so that you can build the extractors you want. Even with the resource map in the game, this can still take a hell of a long time if you just keep getting unlucky with specifically where you land. What I'm getting at here is that outposts are a crazy amount of work, especially considering you never need to build them, and the benefits aren't exactly anything special. They're essentially a luxury element of a game, but also manage to be the most complex and difficult to approach part of the entire experience. This stops it from being a cool feature where you can build a place to relax between missions, and instead becomes a stress-filled experience which you need a break from. Outposts desperately need to be made more player-friendly, and I think the fix is actually pretty easy, because Bethesda did it years ago. In Fallout 4, there are two key parts which made settlement building a million times easier than it is in Starfield: the workshop and supply lines. The red workshops in Fallout 4 had unlimited storage, meaning you could actually hoard the resources you needed within them. The only infinite storage I found in Starfield is the safe in your room at the lodge. While that's kind of nice to have, it isn't actually linked to anything, so you always have to go back to New Atlantis whenever you're wanting to pick things up. If we could get a buildable resource container for outposts that can house as many resources as we want, and is linked in when building, then things instantly get so much better. You still need to go through the hassle of gathering all the resources, sure, but once you've lugged them to your outpost, you're not then stuck building 100 basic chests to try and house everything, because you found you need a few silver and a two-way down to fast travel to the shops. This way you can just store all resources and have them available to build with on that outpost. Just this one change would turn outposts from the current nightmare they can be to construct into something that many players would be happy to mess around with. Once that's in place and you could build a single outpost easily enough, you then might want to build even more. Fortunately, Starfield does actually have cargo links, letting you connect outposts together to share resources. Unfortunately, it's a stupid system with the same problem we've just handled. Rather than just do the thing that Local Leader let you do in Fallout 4 and have a shared inventory of resources you can build with, the Starfield system is to let you select a handful of resources to be flown over to your other outpost in real time. This means you can only transport a very small amount of supplies at a time, you have to wait for ships to land, gather the supplies up, and then depart, and all in all it's just a needlessly sluggish process. So to make it simple, we can just keep the cargo links, but have them work in the same way as Bethesda made it work in Fallout 4. The links connect the outposts and create a combined pool of all resources held in their storage. This means you could construct several resource mining outposts, and then link them all together to have one main outpost that you can build up as your personal settlement, without needing to worry about putting your home in a resource-rich area. You could just get on with the joy of building, and it would be great. I honestly don't think these two changes to outposts would be anything too crazy to ask for, and they make things so much better. Right now, outposts are just way too much of a needless time sink for most players to enjoy building them. With some quality of life improvements, they could easily become the kind of thing that we are all happy to indulge in. Of course, an outpost builder isn't the only type of character that is needlessly nerfed right now. If you've tried to play an unarmed build in Starfield, then you know that it's just not a viable playstyle. Despite the fact that the boxing, martial arts, and Eurostrike skills all focus on making unarmed more powerful, it's easily the weakest playstyle to go for. And the problem is pretty simple. Punching things just doesn't do much damage. I get that Bethesda wanted to be a little more realistic with this game, but they didn't need to both cater for and kill a playstyle at the same time. I have heard people say that all unarmed needs is a flat damage boost, so that your basic unarmed attack deals twice as much damage as they currently do, but I don't think that would work. While it might make early game unarmed focused characters somewhat viable, it's not a system that scales. What does scale in Starfield though are the weapons. Bethesda have built the game as a bit of a looter shooter with the whole legendary system and tiers of weapons. If unarmed is going to work as a playstyle, then we need unarmed weapons in the game. Ones that can show up at various tiers and with legendary effects on them, just like melee weapons. Adding in brand new weapons might sound like more of a DLC change than an update one, but considering unarmed is so terrible right now, I think we need at least a couple of unarmed weapons added to things, without us as the consumer having to pay more money. If Bethesda just add unarmed weapons as part of a future DLC, but leave them out of the base game, then you're basically having to pay for a playstyle to work, and I don't like that myself. Not when we've already established that there's the skills in place for unarmed characters. Nope, instead throw in at least a couple of unarmed weapons. You could even lift them wholesale from Fallout. Just grab the Knuckles and the Power Fist, and bosh, you're done. There's a low tier and a high tier unarmed weapon that you can equip on your punchy characters to give them a fighting chance. This on its own won't make unarmed crazy strong, but it will at least make it somewhat viable. For both melee and unarmed to get stronger after this change, we need to take a look at equipment modding. Right now there's a bit of equipment customization in the game, but not a bunch. There's some neat choices here and there, but overall the equipment modding scene feels a little dull. Not only does it take a while to actually get good mods for your weapons, with needing to invest heavily into the science skill tree and complete several tiers of research before getting any of the good stuff, but once you have got that done, there's not much in the way of choice. If you're a rifle character, sure, there's maybe a couple of different barrel options and a few different internal options you want to test out, but most of the modding categories are bare bones. And that's on guns, the weapons which have the most crafting potential. Melee weapons don't have any modding to them at all. You pick up a sword, and there is zero way to improve it with things like a serrated edge or stealth blade. These are options Bethesda have provided before, but decided not to put in Starfield, and I have no idea why. Starfield needs to be a clear improvement on Bethesda's past games, but in many ways it's managed to take a step back, and I truly don't get why. Add back some past modding options for melee weapons, and it's at least a step towards neutral. I'd also like to see more options overall in these crafting skills, especially when it comes to what you're wearing. There's normally only 2 or 3 choices to pick, and none of them really stand out to me as crazy good. Maybe throw in a few extra tiers of shielding, so that characters who don't invest in crafting so much can only get the first tier, but those who go heavy into crafting get to put tier 4 or 5 shielding, but actually makes you really tough, even when not wearing the best base spacesuit model. This would not only be good for those players who want to raise the numbers on their character as high as possible, but also for those of us who are more into roleplay. I'm making a space trucker style of character right now, and while I really want to wear the space trucker spacesuit, it's just a flat out terrible piece of equipment. I get the choice of being really weak, but looking how I want to, or looking like a mismatched idiot but getting decent resistances. Guess which one I chose. And on the subject of how things look, let's not skip past the skins section on every bit of gear. Where are the skins, Bethesda? Where are they? There's only a couple right now, and both basically came from purchasing the more expensive version of the game. There's none to be unlocked in-game from what I found, and no word on how they're being added in the future. So rather than head down the microtransaction path and make us pay a couple of quid for a slight colour variation, why not do the good thing, and add in some unlockable skins to the game? You could make them rewards for completing missions, or reaching different achievements. Reference these accomplishments with cool little design elements which can help make our equipment stand out a little more. Or better yet, why not take that really cool ship painting feature and add it to the equipment in the game? I would absolutely love to change the colours on my gun. After all, I spend more time looking at it than I do my ship. You've already got the painter in the game, just put it on the skin section of equipment and let us play around with it. I've spent all this time rambling on about equipment modding, but there's another kind of modding that is very popular in Bethesda games. Player mods are a huge part of what keeps their games popular and relevant for years to come. This is the one thing on my list here which I know will arrive in the future. The creation kit is scheduled to arrive sometime next year, but I think for many players this is the main thing they're waiting on. Personally, I don't play with mods, so this is a non-issue for me and I can't say too much on it, but I do still see the importance and value that the modding scene has. When the community gets their hands on the creation kit, they can make the changes they want, and all those empty planets turn from barren wastelands to endless potential. But with that said, I don't like the idea of relying on modders to fix the game, as the community is so fond of saying. The modded experience of the game is not the experience of the game. Bethesda still needs to be working on improvements themselves, and the big one I just hinted at is the empty planet problem. Starfield has hundreds upon hundreds of planets that you can land on, but only about a dozen or so have interesting set pieces to explore thoroughly. The rest are relying on procedural content to generate areas for the player character to explore. Problem is, that's hundreds of planets that are sharing the same limited pool of procedurally generated areas. I can't tell you how many times I've come across that damned cryolab, but I'm already getting bored of it. As someone who much prefers set locations and things being in the same place each time, this hurts me to say, but Starfield needs more procedural locations. With the way the game is built, we're never going to be rid of the procedural element, but if we want it to not get stale, we need a lot more areas that we can stumble across and explore. I get that there's a fair bit of work involved in making new places for us to visit, but that's why you don't create hundreds of different planets with nothing on them. Starfield's scale is absolutely ludicrous, but for places to feel different, we can't be finding the exact same feature on every planet we go to. There needs to be a much wider range of geographical features, enemy outposts, lore-enhancing areas and the like, in order to help incentivise exploration to the player. With DLCs, we're likely going to get even more planets to explore, but if the ones we've got currently don't get a bit more variety, then that's just gonna suck. Please, Bethesda, just have a small team work on procedural areas that can be patched into the game over the next few years. It would create semi-regular content updates for the game, helping it to stay somewhat more relevant than it currently is. The last patch had a few people perk their ears up, as I feel all of us are just wanting more from the game. By regularly making more content, people will keep coming back to it, rather than just experiencing everything once over and then getting bored. Those are the main changes I think Bethesda needs to focus on in future updates. Obviously there's the standard bug fixes, but I also want patches to include things which are exciting to find out about. It's going to be many years before the next Bethesda game launches, so I want this one to be the best it can possibly be. If you have your own thoughts on what needs to be added to Starfield, leave a comment below. Please give the video a like if you enjoyed listening to me, and subscribe for more Starfield content. A big thank you to my patrons who help keep the channel running, and as always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.